see what your thoughts are.
Very excited. Very excited too.
Awesome. Sobaz, thank you so much for joining us on our journey of voices. Now this is our first segment in 2018. So before we get too much into it, I'll let Kenar kick it off.
Start off the New Year. Yes, Happy New Year, everybody. Sobaz, we're happy to be here. Happy to meet you. But for people who don't know you so well, take us back to the stomping grounds, where you're from and what it was like growing up there.
Sure. I was born in London, England, and I of Caribbean ancestry. So both my parents are from Grenada, in the Caribbean. I left England when I was about 15. Moved to Grenada. I lived there for about 6 or 7 years. Then moved to Toronto and went to school in Toronto. Went to York University, studied political science and communications, and I did a BFA also in film and video production. So I've been back home here in Halifax for about 16 years.
Okay, this is home now.
This is home now.
All right. So that's a long journey. So take us back to young Sobaz in England. What was your friend group like? Did you have many role models? What was the home life like? What was going through your mind?
England, well, I like to think of my time in England as a time of carefree childhood, no responsibilities, being able to just sort of really roam free. And there's pluses and minuses to that, because I think at some point you kind of have to find a focus. You have to sort of find yourself. And I think in Western countries like London, like Toronto, like Halifax, there's a lot of distractions. You know, a lot of things are competing for your attention, whether it be, you know, I just think of, you know, the media and the images that it puts out there for young people, telling us who they think we should be or aspire to, you know, and just so many other corporate kind of agendas, you know. So there's a lot competing for our attention, and I felt that very much in England. And it wasn't until I left at 15 that I really did begin to pay attention to the fact that I had an internal world and that there was a voice that I wasn't really listening to. And I didn't sort of tune into that voice until all of those other distractions that sort of preoccupied my time and attention in London were removed. So the Caribbean became a very solitary, quiet time of reflection, and where I came to hear my own voice and understand it.
Okay. Did you have any hobbies growing up? Any passions that you found, especially when you were in Grenada? In that time of self-discovery?
I've always loved stories. I've always loved people telling me stories. I never forget when I left England in '83, my brother who lived in Toronto at the time came to visit, and at that time the Terminator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger was coming out, and so I hadn't seen it, and you know, so in my imagination, you know, when my brother was telling me the film, it was just amazing to me. You know, this person who just fell to the ground and like all these muscles and was sort of fighting for the future and past and all of these really, really interesting things at the time when the Terminator came out. So my imagination ran wild, and then I went to see the film, and it was a real disappointment because it didn't measure up to my brother's storytelling. So that was a very, like I said, I was about 15 or 16, and I love story. I like to run. You know, as I'm getting older now, it's more challenging to get out there and run, but I'm going to get back into that. But I love running, and now I've discovered drumming. So both exercises are therapeutic to me. They allow me, they're cathartic. They allow me to kind of release some pent up energy or frustration.
Okay.
Those are very, very important passions to me.
Okay, thank you for that. And two questions to fire at you for that. The first one is, how did you discover that drumming became that outlet to you, for you, sorry. And is there a certain type of drumming that speaks to you the most?
Well, I drummed. The first time I heard a master drummer in town here, his name is Dr. Henry Bishop. I was at a church, and churches are great places. I'm not going to down a church, but I mean, the type of drumming that I heard was a djembe drum, which is an African drum. And the West hasn't had a great relationship with Africa when it comes to forms of cultural expression. The West kind of has denigrated a lot of that sort of Aboriginal and indigenous type of expression to the continent. So being in a church and listening to a djembe drum, and that djembe drum transformed that church. So at first people were kind of a bit sort of a bit uptight. But the more that group played that drum, and the Emoji Drums was the name of Dr. Bishop's drum ensemble, the more they played that drum, is the more I felt that space transform into and fall into line and in harmony with the drum, the beat of that drum, which for all Aboriginal people is sort of the heartbeat. I think First Nations people call it the heartbeat of Mother Earth, or for African peoples, it's a heartbeat also. And I was just swept away with that transformative moment. And after I just said to Henry, I said, I need to be I want to learn what you do. And that was about 2 years ago. And I've been drumming ever since. It's a djembe drum, which is a West African drum.
Now, leading up to where we are today, iMove, can you tell us some of the stepping stones you took to creating iMove and how it's come to where it is today?
Sure. In 2007, I just finished a film with the National Film Board called Race is a Four-Letter Word. And in that film, it was very much using storytelling as a way to re-author a person's identity. Sort of discovered that through this National Film Board film. And even before that, my graduating film from York back in 2001 was called Weekend Warrior. And so it was kind of characteristic of my filmmaking at York from 97 to now 2001. I was very much turning the camera inward and exploring inner life, my inner life. So very much a focus on my family and my newborn son at the time and my daughter. By 2007, I had completed the film for the National Film Board, had done some work with the CBC. And I was presented with an opportunity to create a video for the Justice Department, Provincial Justice Department. And they asked me to create a video for African Nova Scotian males who were being inordinately incarcerated and still are. This committee from the Justice Department felt that the issue wasn't so much low self-esteem, but low cultural esteem. This sense of not knowing what contributions people of African descent had made to the Atlantic provinces. So they asked me to make a video. I said, well, I've been spending the past 10 years at film school and had been on this very use of narrative to unpack one's internal life. So I wanted to suggest to that committee at the Justice Department that, maybe if you want to get into the hearts and minds of people of African descent, particularly males, could I suggest a different approach? And that's really what, and they said, yeah, sure. So the next 2 years, from 2007 to 2009, was spent designing iMove. And then we rolled out the first life story program of iMove at the Nova Scotia Youth Facility in 2009. And the rest, in other ways, is history.
Okay, I was going to come with that one. I was going to say, how was that big night? How was that big night first rolling it out? And even in those 2 years where you were grinding, creating iMove? You know, what were the stepping stones? You know, how did you start out? How did you hold yourself accountable? You know, to this vision.
Well, I think the vision of iMove has its seed is in sort of rooted in my own experience in terms of using narrative as a tool to reauthor and reshape a person's identity. And I know it works because that's what it did for me. My storytelling through film and video production, being able to turn the camera in on myself, helped me to heal. Growing up in the Caribbean and before that in England, as a person with dark skin, and confronted by racism, anti-black racism, you know, I sort of internalized that to the extent where I wanted to bleach my skin. So there were a number of years where, you know, the self-loathing around my complexion was heavy. But film helped me to work through that. Narrative helped me to work through that. So in terms of being accountable to the process of reauthoring, it started with me. So, and it's rooted in personal experience. So I don't feel like I'm, you know, selling shark oil or any sort of something that doesn't work. It's worked for me. We've been at it since 2009. It's now 2018. And I think that we have a track record of helping people, particularly incarcerated people, to see themselves and be seen differently through narrative. There are a number of platforms: theater, music production, plays, video production, and the approach has always been to use narrative as a way to rebuild healthy community or healthy sense of self, or to reauthor one's identity, and it's played out successfully over and over again. So I feel that my loyalty to what we call now the Kintsugi monologues is, you know, it's tried and tested, and it works.
That loyalty sounds like it's very rooted in authenticity. And I know we spoke a lot about transparency as well, whether it's in front of or behind the camera, especially being able to interact and engage people in their incarcerated communities, but across the board in all the different populations. And for you to transition from London and then go to Grenada and have to transition from there to Toronto and then again to Nova Scotia, what was that like? Because your personal identity shifts as your environmental conditions do, as do, you know, the cultural identity and all of the disparity between that, not just black and white, but black and how regionally or you know, coming into a community as an outsider, you look like them, but you might not be the same as them. So what does that feel like in terms of the authenticity?
Well, I mean, like, I didn't learn all of what you just outlined. Like, in a lot of ways, ignorance is bliss. Like, it didn't occur to me that I would not be accepted in the community. Never. I sort of accept and celebrate others. So to me, it was kind of common sense within my context that the same sort of values and principles of acceptance and diversity that I hold, that others would too. So when I, you know, moving to different communities, you're right. It wasn't until people said or showed me that I wasn't necessarily welcome that it became, but I became aware of that. I come up against that, I do, but it's not something that sort of stops me in my tracks. It's not something that I lose sleep over. I want to work with those who are interested in working with me. When they don't, well, then, you know, time is always a great revealer of truths. And I think that time reveals that, and part ways if you can't work together, or if you don't feel that you belong together. But time reveals that, as opposed to sort of me as an individual coming into a situation with that agenda.
Very much so. And that's learned, again, coming through and experiencing those things. So in the sense of focusing on time and maybe patience or persistence, you know, I move. It's been a process, you know, and so getting to the point where you are now, in between, there are a lot of things. So whereas there, whether it was one or maybe a few defining moments where you really had to strap down, despite all the noise, and just focus on being patient. And if you could speak to that.
And I was part of the case management team where, and I had met this young man while he was incarcerated. So he came out into the community and continued, to work with him. And he did a very, he did a very bad thing. And that was the only time really where I kind of thought that I should step away from this work. That I felt like I had failed him because we couldn't avoid, or help him avoid making that choice to do what he did. But I had wise people around me who helped me to understand the fact that, the limitations of the work, there are limitations. That I have to be realistic with what it is that I'm trying to achieve. And that there's a lot that is not in my control.
Hearing you explain that experience and what was going through your mind and what decisions you chose to make and which ones you didn't, right? The seeds were planted prior in life to your growth before that point, right? But the way we think and how we think about these situations when we're approached with them guides our decisions for the next situation, right? And something closely aligned with how you operate are your values. And just hearing you talk, being next to you, you're a man very grounded in your truth. And to get there, it's a transformational process, right? So what values would you say you have that helped you to become a better man each day?
I mean, my principles are very basic principles that I think are about relationships and how important they are. Healthy relationships, because there are a lot of relationships that we're in that are not healthy. Health is a big, very important goal, aspiration. And I think, when I think of health, I think of wholeness, sort of a complete completeness. And I think of that in terms of narrative as well. We often have these narratives that it's not necessarily that people are lying, it's so that they're incomplete. A person is sharing a story from their point of view. I always say, well, we always know that truth, right? There are three sides to every story. Yours, mine, and then the truth. And it's not to say that each of those narratives aren't truth, but taken independently or in isolation, they're incomplete. So I always think that it's important to, and health is just whole. That's what health means. It's wholeness. And that's an important principle for me in all my endeavors, making sure that my encounters with people, my encounters with myself, the things I strive for are not just rooted in sort of a single thread, but have a multiplicity and have a completeness to them. And as long as I'm able to kind of pursue that, I think life is healthy.
And in that wholeness, kind of two-part to that, speaking on the health and the relationship aspect, because everyone brings their different energy, just as they bring their perspective. As a part of your interactions with various people, do you have a way that you ground yourself, whether it's before, after, or during?
The whole kind of is a big kind of focus these days on mindfulness and meditation and these kinds of things. But I think those things are like ancient wisdoms, right? And they're useful in terms of helping to sort of, I guess, work through or deliver or provide what is needed from me, whatever situation or place I find myself in.
So in that space of awareness, self-awareness, you spoke about that the whole way through your story, just finding and always refining that. Who is Sobaz Benjamin?
Like who I am currently right now, I'm a storyteller. That has become my calling. So all of my time and energy for the past, since my adulthood has been really spent trying to figure out how to craft and share experiences. It's why I continue to work with iMove using theater and radio and video, these tools of storytelling. Because I think there are deeper truths and experiences that we need to hear and learn from. At this point in time, Sobaz is using his gifts of storytelling to share with others on the path towards, I'd like to think of it as self-actualization, people becoming who it is that they aspire to become. And I'm trying to do that myself while sort of walking with others who are doing the same.
That is the power of your why you wake up in the morning, why you can hold yourself accountable because you embody the process. Mm-hmm. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're hearing.
Amazing. I think you already kind of described what success looks like for you in terms of a happy, healthy life, mm-hmm. right? So my next question for you is, what is your next step? I mean, where are we with iMove now, and what's coming up? What can we expect for the new year?
So next steps for iMove. We are getting ready to launch a program called Inspire. And it is really a program where we are using the almost 10 years worth of experience that we've accumulated around narrative, working with incarcerated people to, again, reauthor, rebuild sense of self and community and relationships. So a renewed sense of healthy relationships within my home, within the community, with myself. That's what's on the agenda for Sobaz.
So really embracing the wholeness. And building on that, is there a message that you'd give to somebody listening to this now? What message would you give them?
I do believe in that saying. I think Gandhi said it about being the change that you want to see in the world. I think that's that's, there's something to be said about sort of old, tried and true things, but that seems to be a guiding principle for me these days, is that, that who I am on the inside is who I am on the outside, and not really having any sort of separation. I think that is a good life if you can achieve that, is being what it is that you want to see in the world.
I had two more for you.
Mm-hmm.
Squeeze them out.
Yep.
The last two, you were expressing that love for your family,
mm-hmm.
and what went through my mind was, to you, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a father? Mm-hmm. And then also, if you could end us off with some suggestions that you might have had for yourself from when you were younger.
Well, I think you have to be there. I think you have to be present. I think you have to be present for the good times and the not so good times. And you have to, so consistently being there is, there's always sacrifices that we have to make in terms of maybe something we're aspiring to achieve. But I think, I feel fortunate that the line of work that I've been in has allowed me to be available to my children. In the earlier years, not so much now, but in the earlier years I did a lot of work from home. So, you know, I could see them when they went to school, see them when they come home for lunch, see them when they come from school, take them to the park, be a part of their lives in a concrete way. And I guess this falls into that whole mindfulness piece, is that when you are positioned in a place where, you know, the task at hand, whatever that task at hand is, you try to commit to that so that when you are doing important things like spending time with your family, you can be 100% present and not sort of off someplace else in your mind, in your spirit. Actually, the truth is within each of us, within me, and trusting that, that is enough to help me to take the next step towards, you know, the journey and the path that I'm on. So it's really trusting that path, trusting the fact that what you have as an internal life is adequate and enough, and not being sort of afraid of the unknown and the uncertainty and the discomfort. That working through that will help you to get to the place where it is that you so desperately want to go.
It's a powerful one to end on. So thank you so much for joining us. On this last part, we're going to get you to your official sign off.
I'm Sobaz Benjamin, and this is my voice.